Good evening, citizens, council, staff, and guests. City Clerk, are we ready?
Yep. Mayor Cernanek?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman?
Here.
Councilmember Brinkman?
Here.
Councilmember Cole?
Here.
Councilmember Stallman?
Here.
Councilmember Stein?
Here.
Councilmember Valdez?
Present.
Please join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As far as the agenda tonight, there'll be Senator Newell may be arriving later regarding the fact of our proclamation for conflict resolution, and we'll try to squeeze her in appropriately. If that comes in after she arrives, she's at another council meeting a little bit earlier this evening. And with regard the ordinances on second reading and public hearing, as far as items, I believe there's 7C, 7D, and 7E. Depending upon any roster signups that there may be, we may combine those items as far as dealing with questions and presentation from finance. Are there any other agenda items to consider? And seeing none, move to the minutes, looking for a motion.
I have a motion. Boy, we have the volume up tonight here. I have a motion based on the clerk's certification that the September 16th video recording as the minutes for the September 16th, 2014 regular meeting of City Council and the October 7th video recording as the minutes for the October 7th, 2014 regular meeting of the City Council and the October 14th video recording as the minutes for the October 14th, 2014 study session be approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Council?
I have a question. I wasn't here for the 7th, but I was here for the 14th.
Okay, Colleen, can you make the note on that?
I can amend that.
Thank you. With that.
No, I mean as far as voting.
Oh, you don't.
I mean, I knew I wasn't here.
But you saw the recording.
Yeah, but should I still be voting on it?
Well, it's certified by the clerk.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have any issues? Any other issues?
Why did we not do 916?
No, that was mentioned. All three have been mentioned. So 4A, 4B, and 4C. Council, are you ready to vote?
I don't know if I am.
Thank you.
6.5.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
You said you watched them. So. Okay. As far as citizen comments for this evening. Unscheduled appearances are an opportunity for any citizen to express opinions or ask questions regarding city services, council policies, or other matters of community concern that are not part of the scheduled agenda. Generally, an immediate response should not be expected. Typically, issues are referred to city staff for follow-up information or research and reported back to the council and the individual that initiated the comment or inquiry. If any citizen would like to speak during unscheduled public appearances, please complete a green citizen card, and they're up on the table at the back of the room. And please provide the green card to the city clerk or leave it at the podium, and there is a 4-minute time limit for public comment. Would anyone want to come forward? Jim Taylor, we'll start on the left side of the room. And please state your name. You can leave your address on the green card.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening, Jim.
Strange to be looking at you from this angle. I'm Jim Taylor, and I live on West Riverwalk Circle. Last Friday night, I went to Town Hall to see RFK, the story about Robert Kennedy's last years of life. Outstanding performance. Highly recommended it. This is the last weekend coming up to see it. It's a one-man show, but he's really an outstanding portrayal of Robert Kennedy. As I was approaching the door, I had a lady ask me if I was a registered voter. And I said, yes. She said, would you like to sign my petition? And I said, no, I don't think so. I said, what's it about? And she told me it's stopping eminent domain abuse in the city. I said, no, I don't think so. And turned to walk toward the door, and she said, you know, they have condemned 477 acres in Littleton. I stopped and turned around. I said, what did you say? And she repeated it again. And I said, I don't believe that's true. So she reached in her little bag and pulled out a map. And the map was showing all the survey areas where the condition surveys were done as the areas that I'm assuming she is claiming that has been condemned. I told her it wasn't true, that there had been no condemnations of that magnitude. She stuck her little paper back in her bag and turned and walked away. So I went on into town hall, but I watched her a little bit from the inside, and she, again, accosted every person who came up to go through the door into town hall. But that is it's a lie. There has been no condemnation at all in the city of Littleton. And if these paid petitioners are going around saying that, I don't know how we correct it. But it is an absolute lie. There has been no condemnation of that magnitude ever in this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Please come on up.
Hi, good evening. My name is Susan East, a Littleton resident. I'm here tonight to bring up issues I believe were discounted by the city attorney and the mayor at the October 7th city council meeting regarding Member Stein's reported approach of Mr. Jim Donnelly, I believe a resident of Littleton and the owner of the Evergreen Motel located off of Santa Fe Drive regarding the purchase of his motel property. I believe the city attorney stated that Mr. Stein approached Mr. Donnelly as a business matter, that Mr. Donnelly made clear he had no interest in selling the property, and as a result, Mr. Stein no longer had any interest in purchasing the property, and thus it was a finished and essentially done matter. I believe Mayor Cernak stated the issue of urban renewal involving the property had not yet come before the council for vote, and will not until November 4th, so again, it's not an issue of concern. The reality is, this matter has been enough of a concern to be picked up by 3 newspapers and continues to be a concern for citizens like me. Here's why. CRS 3125-1043 of the Urban Renewal Law states, no commissioner, other officer, or employee of an authority, nor any immediate member of the family of any such commissioner, officer, or employee shall acquire any interest, direct or indirect, in any project or in any property included or planned to be included in any project. Does it surprise council and the city attorney we would expect this prohibition to apply to our council members who actually vote on the passage of any urban renewal project, and I believe were involved in the formation of the study areas for urban renewal in Littleton? CRS 2014Oct21 regarding ethical principles for local governmental officials states, a local governmental official should not acquire or hold an interest in any business or undertaking which he has a reason to believe may be directly and substantially affected to its economic benefit by official action to be taken by an agency over which he has substantive authority. Although this is a guide to conduct rather than a binding prohibition, don't the citizens and property owners in Littleton have a right to expect their council members to conduct themselves at a higher ethical level? Section 37 of the Charter of Littleton regarding voting by the council members states every member, when present, must vote on ordinances, resolutions, and motions, except he shall not vote on matters involving the consideration of his own official conduct or when his personal or financial interest is involved. CRS 314142 states, any member of the governing body of any city or town who has a personal or private interest in any matter proposed or pending before the governing body shall disclose such interest to the governing body, shall not vote thereon, and shall refrain from attempting to influence the decisions of other members of the governing body in voting on the matter. CRS 2418-1093A reads similarly. Did Councilmember Stein have a personal or private interest in Mr. Donnelly's property when the resolution on eminent domain was voted on August 19th? Since that time, I believe Mr. Stein has exhibited a personal, financial, and/or private interest in Mr. Donnelly's property, and I do not believe it is a dead issue, since Council's resolution regarding eminent domain can always be changed by this council or a future council, or Mr. Donnelly can change his mind about selling. Thus, I do not think it's asking too much of our council members to not attempt to purchase property in which they might be voting on in significant ways that could be beneficial to said property or to themselves in relation to the current owner, and to recuse themselves from any such vote involving the property, which I believe Mr. Stein must do if they have made such an attempt. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. City Attorney, would you like to comment at all at this point?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. My comments last week were specifically noted that there were allegations made that had accused Councilmember Stein of violating the law. I think I made clear that based upon the facts as I understood them, no laws were violated. The statement you just heard was a statement that, at least as what I heard, was more based upon goals and ethics and being held to a higher standard. I didn't hear any. I heard a lot of statutes cited, but I didn't hear any allegations of violating the law. So while the introduction was that the city attorney and the mayor kind of downplayed what was the comments last week, I guess I'll stand by my statements, not last week, the last meeting, that as far as I know, no laws were violated. Certainly citizens have the right to their opinions on what standards council members should be held to that are not legal standards.
And with regard to myself on this, Susan, just to provide some clarification, eminent domain was a general policy, not dealing with any specific interest in any property on that basis. So at least as I'm looking at that, when we start talking about general issues like comprehensive plan that might include our own personal property or residence, when it's dealing with the general policies that we're going with, it's up to the individual member to determine whether they have a conflict of interest. I mean, that's how it kind of goes on that front. And my comment about we've not dealt with a specific plan along Santa Fe, if there would have been some ownership at that point in time and there would have been a conflict, there would have been an opportunity then to excuse or recuse yourself from any vote on that basis. So that's where my comments were centered. So, anyone else? Public comment? Yes, Jeannie.
Good evening, Council. Jeannie Erickson, 5567 South King Street. I would like to inform everyone about a wonderful event that will be taking place on Saturday, October 25th. This will be taking place at O'Toole's Garden Center from 10 until 2. It's a community event with proceeds going to Interfaith Community Services. This will be their 5th annual chili cook-off and pumpkin carving contest. There will also be Bring Your Children in Halloween costumes and prizes for the best costumes. There will be a trick-or-treat street, and there will also be a scavenger hunt for the children. Trophies and prizes will be awarded for best costume, best chili, and best carved pumpkin. If you like, you may purchase chili for the best price in town, 50 cents a bowl, and all those proceeds will go to Interfaith Community Services. That is this Saturday from 10 until 2, and we hope to see everyone there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live in District 1. Three comments. One is I'd like to thank Citizen Susan Neese for bringing up the citations in state law that regard the behavior of our elected officials, their families, and people who they're associated with. While this may not be law, I would like to echo the opinion that we citizens of Littleton hold our elected officials to a higher standard. Actually, I don't say a higher standard, to the state standard. It's a guideline, and that's what I expect from my elected officials. Honestly, let me again iterate something I've brought up before. I carried petitions for the proposal that we limit executive sessions. And I've reported to you before that, and I also carried the rezoning petitions. The rezoning petitions, which require, a 3/4 or 2/3 majority of council to vote on rezoning requests, was a harder sell. But boy, the limit on executive sessions were, let me have that, and 8 out of 10 people. They were eager to sign it, and that was 2 years ago. So what about citizen distrust is not getting through to council and staff? It is out there. I'm reporting it to you. I'm begging you to listen to my report about this because it's real. So I appreciate what Susan said, and I urge you to listen to it, look up the citations, and respond to that. Second of all, in response to Jim Taylor's comments about a paid petition carrier, the paid petition carrier may not have said the right thing, but when you sign a petition as a citizen, you're required to read the language. And the language does not say anything about condemnation. And I'm going to say I know a lot of other people carrying petitions, and I'm quite sure they're not saying that. So that's not representative, and it's not, that's not what the proposed measure says. So just to kind of put that in perspective. Third, there's a breakfast meeting this Thursday for City Council and Planning Board. And my understanding is that this is where City Council is going to talk to Planning Board about future direction. And this is because the Planning Board was going to hold a neighborhood meeting October 2nd or 3rd with the Heritage High School neighborhood to work on a plan. And more than 400 people showed up when at most 80 were expected. Again, let me recall that the people want to see a responsive and open council. Yet, when 400 people show up to a meeting and the meeting can't be held, even if there is a misunderstanding about one of the agenda items, even if, the response of the council is to have a breakfast meeting that most of those people will not be able to attend, which doesn't have an agenda, I believe which is not recorded, in which we have no voice in. Council, I urge you, I'm trying to let you build a bridge with your people. The opportunity exists here for you to have a study session, to have it in a regular session where Planning Board and Council talk together so we can see what's happening. Please don't let this breakfast meeting be your response. Thanks.
Thank you.
That meeting is scheduled. Yes.
So, thank you, Council. It's great to see you from a different perspective tonight. Later on this evening, we have very important agenda items that I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about, but it is a big part of the city in that we deal with our priorities expressed in the budget. And so we're dealing with that annual allocation. Also on the agenda, we're taking a look at our mill levy that we assess on property. So that property tax is to be considered. It hasn't changed for a long period of time, and we're holding that. What I did want to do is indeed talk with you a little bit about our invitation to an open meeting that is being held next Tuesday evening. It's at ACC in the all-purpose room. I think it was formerly referred to as the cafeteria. It's at 6 p.m. That evening. It's going to be facilitated not by council, but by others. I think we'll have the opportunity to certainly participate in that and want folks to be aware of that. I kind of put it in terms of being able to clear the air with regards to some things that may have been misinterpreted. But on the other side, the part that I think is really important is the opportunity to collaborate, create, and share through small table discussions, and the information that is gathered in that is going to be shared. You'll hear me mention this again, but I wanted to make sure that that invitation gets out specifically to you and to anyone else as far as the citizens that may be listening this evening or will be listening to any replay during the week. Again, 6 p.m., ACC, general purpose room, formerly known as the cafeteria. So be there.
What's the purpose of the meeting? Purpose of the meeting?
Purpose of the meeting, and folks will be receiving invitations, is to deal with some of the urban legends, so dealing with some of the myths on that side, but also to gather from folks some of their ideas as to the future and direction of the city. So, thank you.
So we do not have our study session meeting that night then?
Correct.
Do you want to clarify the...
Sue Sullivan, District 1. And my question is about that meeting. On the agenda calendar, it's called Town Hall Meeting. Is our citizens going to be allowed to discuss things on the urban development or the urban legends, whichever you want to? And if there's more people than the 30 or the 80 or the 400, does it end at 7:30 still?
Thank you, Lou. My understanding, and I think some of the details with regard to the facilitation, Lou, are being worked out, but there will be the opportunity to have small groups, and then gathering from the small groups will be a chance for everyone to have a chance to hear that. So the small groups will be, in part, facilitated as well. So, thank you. Oh, and also with regard the Thursday meeting, that breakfast meeting has been canceled for Pam's response on that.
It's rescheduled.
It's rescheduled. So, seeing no other citizen comments or public comments, we move to the consent agenda items. The consent agenda items can be adopted by a single simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member and will be considered after the consent agenda items that might be considered as a group. The consent agenda items include 6A, Ordinance 39-2014, which is an ordinance on first reading authorizing conveyance by quick claim deed the city's interest in permanent roadway purposes and utility easements to a private property owner. Item 6B is Ordinance 41-2014. It's an ordinance on first reading, amending Ordinance Number 28, Series of 2013, known as the Annual Appropriation Bill for all municipal purposes for the fiscal year beginning January 14, 2014, and January 1, 2014, and ending December 31, 2014. So that's with regard to this year's budget. 6C is Resolution 89-2014, resolution to approve the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Littleton, South Metro Fire Rescue Authority, and West Douglas County Fire Protection District regarding joint response to the Backcountry Joint Response Area. Item 6D is Resolution 109-2014. It's a resolution approving the 2015 operating plan and budget for the Highline Business Improvement District.
I'd like to pull that, if you please.
Okay. Item 6E is Resolution 111-2014. It's a resolution approving the Aspen Grove Business Improvement District's 2015 operating plan and budget. Item 6F is Resolution 114-2014, resolution setting the fee for issuance of permit under the Neighborhood Permit Parking Program.
I'd like to pull that one.
Thank you. Item 6G is Resolution 115-2014, resolution as the governing body of the City of Littleton Emergency Medical Transportation Enterprise approving the 2015 budget. Item 6H is Resolution 116-2014. It's a resolution as the governing body of the Littleton Sewer Utility Enterprise approving the 2015 budget. And item 6I is Resolution 117-2014. It's resolution as the governing body of the City of Littleton Stormwater and Flood Management Utility Enterprise approving the 2015 budget. Looking for a motion on consent agenda items 6A through C, E, G, H, and I.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Council, we have a motion and a second. Looking for a vote in favor of the consent agenda items as mentioned.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Okay. Moving to what had been labeled consent agenda item 6D, Councilmember Stallman.
Thank you. I had asked the city manager, I understood there was maybe someone present from the business improvement district that could theoretically answer a couple of questions. Not so much.
I hear so.
Okay, then.
We were told they would have someone here.
Yeah. The question, I'm not quite sure what to do with this. I understand we have to more or less approve this.
Right.
The question I've got is if you go to page 16 of the attachment that shows the operating plan and budget, there's two line items in 2015, one referred to as dissolution reserve and the other referred to as contingency. And then there is another contingency item identified on page 18. And my recollection was, and this came up last, I think on the meeting of the 7th, and we tabled this pending some additional information, and a communication was received from the Business Improvement District that basically said, there was a paragraph of information that had a lot of words that were had a lot of syllables in them, which didn't really say a whole lot of what exactly it is they were thinking. I mean, is there any interpretation you can give us on this?
Not
short
beyond what we gave you for that.
That they just, stuff that they may do, and
Correct.
If they're allowed to do it based on their charter and so forth and so on, just.
Correct.
Is there, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know this is an annual frustration for several of you, and I think it's this is more of a personal statement, but I think it's interesting how the legislature set the council or local jurisdiction up as basically a review audit agency with no control over it. And so I think you're primarily looking at it to make sure that they're in service of paying their bonds off first and there's no malfeasance occurring, but you really don't have the ability to go in and, other than inquiry, which gets the audit, affect the outcome of their budget other than approving it.
Well, it is frustrating, and I guess to your point, we've got an obligation without a lot of authority to do anything about the obligation other than say thank you. I guess I find it disappointing that notwithstanding they send the budget in, we ask a question, they send a very vanilla reply and then don't attend the meeting to explain it in a little more detail. I'd table it again, but I don't know if that exposes us. Is there any value in forcing them to actually come in and answer a question?
Ken can answer the question on the exposure, but I think it gets back to, are you going to approve it at the end of it? I mean, to what end does that information, is it inquiry? And I had suggested last time that you approve it and we continue to push them for the answer so we can be done with the product itself and still work with them to get you the answer, because at the end of the day, they say we're using a reserve for X, you're still going to say okay, basically, because you're put in a position of having to say yes or continue to ask for more information. But once you have it, you get it. And so I know you disagreed with me last time, but I'd continue to say approve it, and we will continue through, we had our deputy city attorney is the one who's been making the inquiries through their attorney, and we will continue to push them for that and get the answer at some point. So as opposed to tabling it and continuing this.
Yeah.
Councilmember Stallman, I think we have, you could table it legally, and I think we have the next 2 council meetings where you could take final action. As Michael mentioned, I mean, I recall the question from last time was questions about the reserve, so they've explained that the reserve for the dissolution reserve is because it's in their long-term plans to dissolve. They're going to start putting some money together. Now, you've wanted to drill down a little bit. They told us somebody would be here to answer questions, and they're not. So, again, from a legal standpoint, if you wanted to delay action on it, you could, but I tend to agree with Michael and his advice to the council.
Well, all right, I'll more for the appearance of aggravation than the truth, than the substance of aggravation. But I'm going to go ahead and say we table this, put a motion out there to table this until the next meeting again, just to see if they'll actually deign to bless us with their presence. How about that?
Second.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second to table this. Do we have a table-specific date?
Next to the first meeting in November, I guess, is what, the
November 4th.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to limit the agenda for November 4th. Is there a problem if we move it to November 18th?
No.
Okay, so
18th will work.
November 18th.
Because of what we have on November 4th? Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, part of it is also election night. So.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table, a motion before us that has been seconded to table Resolution 109-2014 to November 18, giving city staff the opportunity to let them know we'd like some good faith presence, even if they continue to obfuscate the response. So I'll state it that way.
Or a solid response.
Or a solid response.
Would be fine.
Yes. So,
with less syllables?
Any other questions, Council?
Well, I don't know, either is fine. If one of those happens, it might get tabled again.
And then we'll deal with
I
that.
mean, if a particular one of those happens.
I believe you have to approve it by December 5th.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table, or on before us, to table it to November 18. Council ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Show up next time.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman on item 6F.
This is a resolution setting the fee of $15 for the issuance of the permit under the neighborhood permit parking program, and that's all that's in this resolution, is to establish the fee. I'm really asking council for a no vote on this. I just think we can do away with a $15 every 2-year fee for the inconvenience of neighbors at neighborhoods working within this permit system that's going to be set up. I think in most cases the reason there's a permit system is because the community impacts that neighborhood in some way, and if one were to really dig, it might be reasons that council established, such as limiting down the requirements for downtown parking for historical buildings, or the fact that we have a light rail station and that impacts up the road the townhouses. That wasn't something that the townhouse folks created. It was something that was a result of the community and the city. So I'm looking for a no vote on this, and that would be my reason for pulling it. Do I get a second on basically? I guess I need to propose the motion. Get a second, and then we'll discuss it further.
I'll second it.
You got a second.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second to have it be a $0 fee. Deputy City Manager Broughton.
Mr. Mayor and Council, Mike Broughton, Deputy City Manager. The fee was proposed because we're going from a location-based system to a database system, and so not database, but data-based system, so that we can. There will be additional studies that will be involved in setting these neighborhood permit areas, and to ensure that we're counting those residents. So there's additional staff time involved in issuing permits for this new program, and that's why the additional fee was proposed. If you do care to do away with it, the resolution does not need to be changed. It would just have to be set annually at 0. So there's no need to amend there's no need to amend the ordinance when it comes to you in second reading. If you do pass the
You're
change.
referring to a later agenda item
Correct.
for tonight. So, Council, additional discussion or questions?
Mike, I was just going to ask, do you, based on some reasonable approximation of the number of potential parking permit streets, assuming it's less than every street, how much incremental staff time? I mean, are we talking staff time that's somebody's doing a job that they're, full-time FTEs kind of stuff already, or are we talking incremental cost and more or less order of magnitude, do you know?
Sure, and it would depend on what neighborhoods would come in, of course, to request that the zone be established. The current program has always been under Public Works for the administrative side and then enforcement in PD, and we've moved that all entirely over to PD. So Chief Stevens and his staff will be now be participating in those initial studies, as well as the defining the zone, putting together a proposal more or less for consideration to move forward. So there is some additional time. Before, if it was just if you were by a school, if you were near downtown, you're near a light rail station, you got it. And now we're actually putting some more requirements into it.
I thought the text said something about volunteers, the Citizens Police Academy doing a chunk of it.
Correct. I believe that's who the chief has tapped to conduct those. Okay. I think he can address that.
Those guys they can be expensive, though.
Hi.
Howdy.
Chief Stevens, Chief of Police. So basically, to administer the program, we've done some preliminary study work already on a currently proposed area in the 5700 block of South Bemis. From the police department's perspective, at least at this point, I don't anticipate a ton of these requests coming in. I think we're able to absorb it right now with our existing personnel, whether that be volunteers or sworn personnel or our parking enforcement officer, and basically learn as we go, as we modify this process. We may be coming to you in the future and saying it's too much and we may need a small fee at that point, but I think we're okay. From the police department's perspective on administering the program, there's some minor one-time costs, I believe, relatively low one-time costs for permits to reissue the permits and those types of things, but I don't see an issue for eliminating the fee.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Randy?
Thanks, Chief. This is
Councilmember Stein.
Not addressed to you. I have a comment and a question. Thanks, first of all, to Councilmember Beckman for bringing this up, because I was going to rubber stamp this when it came through, and I hadn't thought about it. I thought $15, whatever, sounds fair. But the downtown area have a lot of people that live near Main Street who have now been really affected by not only light rail, but the approval by previous councils of, for example, including without limitation, Terracotta and Merle's. There was really no effort, I think, made, and I'm not beating anybody up who can't speak for themselves or defend themselves, but to set aside a fund or anything like that in lieu of fulfilling the parking requirement. So that really left the neighborhoods kind of defend for themselves, and I think this is the city's response to try to ameliorate that situation. So that being said, although I had not thought about this before Councilmember Beckman teed it up, I think it's maybe unfair to charge the citizens to pay for trying to simply solve a problem that was not of their own creation. That said, I now have a question, and as much as there's been ample allegations of impropriety in this room tonight, I'd like to ask the city attorney if he believes that because I live in the downtown area and my voting on a measure that could conceivably save or cause me to spend $15, I would be better called to, out of an abundance of caution, recuse myself, or if you think that this is not such a significant issue, that I can participate with my fellow council members in doing the good business of the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Stein. You know, as the mayor pointed out in his comments, there are some actions that relate to quasi-judicial proceedings where a personal interest in property is going to be affected by a particular action that the council would take, either with respect to that property or another, and there are general legislative actions that the council takes that affect anyone and theoretically could impact their property rights. Theoretically, they have a personal, to the extent that you're concerned about it personally, and your job is to try to sustain and enhance the quality of life in the city, so therefore you would have a personal interest. And this would be an example of the latter situation where you're talking about a citywide program, and I do not believe there is any legal personal interest that would cause you to need to recuse yourself, or any other council member who lives near an area that might theoretically be subject to a neighborhood parking plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmember Cole?
So I have a question. It's not directly on this, indirect. There's a cost involved in policing giving the tickets. So might the tickets be at a fee level that would help offset this? I mean, people don't have to get a ticket because they don't have to park where they're not supposed to. So,
again, Chief Stevens, from my perspective on that, on the enforcement piece, we have a full-time parking enforcement officer in the city. I think as part of that officer's regular duties, it's not burdensome to enforce these particular zones any worse than it would be to enforce any other parking. So I don't see any additional expense on our part that would necessitate any additional fees. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I'm trying to visualize the parking person perhaps being downtown near the various schools. So she can't be every place at once. So, but if we think we can cover it, then I'm okay.
Yeah, I don't anticipate any overly burdensome additional workload based on this.
Thank you.
Mayor, just for additional background, it's common for municipalities to charge for people in neighborhood parking permit programs or residential permit parking programs. There is an overhead. You have to print the permits. In our case, we were proposing a 2-year permit at $7.50 a year. While there is no cost now, as both the chief and Deputy City Manager Broughton pointed out, there is administrative overhead. There are costs associated with the program. And I think the philosophical question becomes, it is a public street. And how do you balance the local residents with the fact that we have public streets, and which we all pay for through our general taxation? And so our belief was that it should be a minimal cost that at least covers the administrative overhead of what we've been experiencing, fully understanding Councilman Beckman's argument that we, the city, through our previous actions, have potentially caused some of the problems by not requiring parking. And then, as Councilman Stein pointed out, we didn't do an offset of that. We didn't agree to build a parking garage when it hit some number. And so it's definitely a policy question for you guys, but just want you to know it's common. I'm not aware, except probably in some smaller communities, of anywhere that doesn't charge for that, so the general government taxes aren't paying for those specific areas where, again, it's that balance between public space and private use. So that's where it comes from, and we will certainly track our associated costs with this program and come back to you if anything else happens. And we do believe this will cause a conversation as we implement these in the downtown area for what are we, the jurisdiction, going to do to handle the parking as we push these people away from some of the residential areas, because they're there for a reason.
Yes. Additional discussion, Council? Okay, we're ready to go on this. It has to do with setting the parking permit fee at $0 at this point in time, and carries forward to item 7A as the Deputy City Manager presented. So, Council ready to vote?
The vote is 5 in favor with Mayor Pro Tem Beckman and Mayor Cernanek voting no. Motion carries.
Okay.
What?
Well, you had to vote no.
I don't think you understood that, Bruce.
Well, I may not have.
I think you voted against your motion, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You want to revote?
No,
You want a mulligan?
I was still believing a no vote would be a no to the motion.
I'm sorry?
I did not realize we had amended the motion.
I thought you proposed a motion.
Your motion
I was proposing, I said I was looking for a no vote.
Well, the vote was on a motion to make it a no fee
I'm sorry.
permit.
Yeah. Well, do we get do-overs?
So we can, I move we reconsider. That's it.
You got
Part of
it passed.
Yeah.
Mayor and council, any member of council who voted on the prevailing side of the motion can move for reconsideration. And Councilmember Cole just did.
I'll second that.
Yeah, okay.
Go again.
So just,
okay.
Let's
can you
redo.
restate it?
Okay, the restated motion is to put the parking permit fee at $0. That carries forward to item 7A, or excuse me, 7A. And at this point in time, a yes vote means you're voting for 0. A no vote would be for something else.
So flip up is yes, flip no is down.
There, I can do that one.
Up,
Okay.
Bruce.
Council.
The vote is 6 in favor with Mayor Cernanek voting no. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Good job.
Bruce, Phil, I would just suggest that we earmark that, and I'd like to, if you could come back 6 months or a year and kind of give us a idea of where we are with that, if it's based on the need and the demand, and thanks.
Agreed. Thanks.
Okay. We now move to section 7 of our agenda, which is ordinances for second reading and or public hearing. Oh. And as I mentioned earlier, we have some flexibility in our agenda to recognize Senator Newell, and I have the opportunity to present to her our proclamation for the month of October as Conflict Resolution Month. Senator Newell, would you like to come forward and possibly give us some comments?
Thank you so much, Mayor and council members. I was expecting to sit for a few minutes and listen, so thank you.
This is the break we have.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Well, members, if I may, I don't know who to hand this out to, Mayor.
Colleen.
Welcome to Conflict Resolution Month in Colorado. I'm so grateful. Thank you very much for your support again this year. As many of you know, I have been working at the Capitol since 2009 with the issue of conflict resolution. You can't have a more appropriate topic for the Capitol or a city council. And so I'm very grateful to be able to do this every year when we get to go around the state and talk to people about how to resolve conflict in a civil way and in a peaceful way. So thank you, first of all, for the proclamation. Very much appreciate it. What we are doing throughout the state is going to city councils like this and talking with elected officials about the notion of having civil discourse. Now, I know that's very unusual, knowing what is running on our television ads right now, but I like to say to elected officials to use the conflict to your benefit, to have the brainstorming that can come out of that, the collaboration that can come out of that, and still remain in a civil conversation. So I know that you either hear about coyotes, or you hear about foxes, or you hear about road signs, or I know that you hear about a lot of things, as I do, from your constituents.
TIF or urban renewal.
Or urban renewal.
Or
That's
owner-occupied
a
attached
example.
housing. So.
Yes, and I really do appreciate that, Mayor, because we've had nothing but civil conversations. I do want to accentuate, too, that the conflict that happens in the workplace as well, which can be with the Littleton employees, it could be with your own businesses, and the conflict in the workplace costs companies millions of dollars every single year through lower productivity of the employees, through absenteeism, through employee turnover, from retraining, et cetera. And we are trying to make a difference in that in the Colorado businesses, to make sure that we do maintain our good economy that we have in the state. So that is another sector that we deal with, and then also the schools. So we're going out to the schools and teaching kids how to resolve conflict on the playground, and hopefully preventing things like bullying, and which can spiral down for many kiddos and even into, as you know, the teen years. So we're doing that. We're going into the interfaith community and talking with different churches, as well as community groups, and teaching about how to resolve conflict in a meaningful and civil way. The resources I wanted to tell you about, and Councilman Stein will laugh at this, but I first start out with the Mediators Association. And we have a very robust community of mediators across the state. And most of you know I work very hard to prevent from a litigious environment and prevent cases going into court that can be so costly. So I'm a big promoter of both facilitation, mediation, and sometimes arbitration, so that we can avoid the costly court cases. And the other resource is called the Conflict Center. That's in Northwest Denver. It was actually one of the first in the country to focus on conflict in the schools. So they have a program, or several programs actually, that go out and teach in the schools. In fact, I think Littleton Public Schools has used them before. As well as Littleton is one of my prime examples for restorative justice and how that works very well in peaceful restoration to a community after a conflict. Then, and then lastly, your local your local mediators, as Councilman Stein can guide you to, and then also some of the counties now are doing volunteer mediations as well, to avoid from some of the cases ending up in long court proceedings. So I wanted to let you know a little bit about that, those resources, and I would ask that the entire month, if not every day of the year, that every conversation that you have an opportunity to have a civil, peaceful conversation. And no matter who's yelling or screaming at you, for whatever reason, we are at choice of how we are responding. And hopefully, as elected officials, we're setting the model for that and the model for the civil discourse. So I thank you again. I am very proud to represent Littleton down at the Capitol. And at that, Mayor, I'll take questions, comments, concerns. I do not take threats, but I take anything else.
Council, any comments? Senator Newell, one of the things you should be aware of is we actually did have mediation training for some folks that are making themselves available in our neighborhoods for neighbor-to-neighbor issues. And so I believe it was 14 or so mediators or pseudo-mediators to be able to provide some assistance to our law enforcement folks in dealing with neighbor-to-neighbor issues. And it's big on our agenda to get to know your neighbors and knock on the door and not wait till a crisis time.
That is fantastic news. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
So, and the other that you might be interested in is I went to Stories on Stage this past weekend, and the executive director, Anthony, he was part of brushing up on Shakespeare, and he handed out a sheet that's create your own Shakespearean insults. So you may find some benefit to this, and I will get it to you so you can use it down at the Capitol. Shakespearean insults such as, geez, thou art a droning dog-headed codpiece, or such. So it might help at least increase vocabulary.
Well, thank you for that, Mayor. Appreciate that.
Very good.
Well,
thank you, Senator.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Senator.
And thank you for your flexibility, too. Appreciate it.
Okay. And moving back to our ordinances for second reading and public hearing, I've been presented with the rosters, and there has been no one signed up for any of these at this point in time. First up is item 7A. It's ordinance 25-2014, which is an ordinance on second reading amending Title IX, Chapter 1 of the City Code pertaining to residential permit parking. Deputy City Manager Broughton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Mike Broughton, Deputy City Manager. We've talked a little bit about this just given the past discussion here. So we're bringing forward this new process, moving again from a location-based to a data-based permit process for neighborhood permit parking. To determine the need, the police will now be administering the program, and they'll conduct a vehicle survey. 75% of parking, they'll be looking for two items. To pass the test, to move into allowing a zone. 75% of parking is occupied on a block face or a block, and 25% of those parking there are non-residents, and that will be determined through a license plate scan. Second item related to this, we were really looking to balance between resident parking and public benefit, and City Manager Penny mentioned this a little bit ago. They are public streets. Individuals do have a right to park on those streets, even if it is in front of your house. And so it's really trying to establish that balance between the public good and the residents' desire to park in front of their house or near their house. Three, with this process, we're looking at just having a better defined process in city code. It was a fairly nebulous ordinance as written back in, I think it was 2006. This gives some structure within code, and then also we have put together guidelines to help the average citizen understand the process, and those were included in your packet as well. And then 4, one permit equals 3 permits, essentially, because you get one base permit and then 2 guest permits. You also have the option of applying for a contractor permit if you have work occurring in your house or your residence. And there are other provisions in there allowing for the city manager or his designee to grant additional permits if you say you had a large social gathering and there's an issue that day or something and you want additional parking available. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding it, regarding the new process for the program.
Okay. Council, any questions?
Yes.
Cool. Councilmember Valdez?
Cool. Right now, in many of these areas, there's limited parking time-wise, right?
Correct.
Yeah. What does a parking ticket cost down there?
Pardon?
What does a parking ticket violation ticket cost?
We do not know.
Give me a guess.
$75 is the downtown Main Street.
Do you have any idea? I'm just wondering what it is. Mr. Beckman and I were just talking about it earlier. Just wondering if it's possible we should consider a higher amount to encourage people not to violate it. The chances of them getting a parking ticket is not likely. So people will, but once they get caught, if it's only a minimal amount, it was worth it.
Sure. And we'd be happy to research that and provide that information to you. This will be, you can adjust, at least for the permit fee, you can adjust it annually. The ordinance is written so that now, as your recent action, you provided for a 0 fee for the first year. So next year, you have the option of applying a fee if there are issues. And as the chief mentioned,
right, and it's
we can
not the
always
fee
bring
that
that back to
I'm
you.
talking about. It would, of course,
Sure.
be a parking ticket.
Right. And just a clarification, this ordinance doesn't deal with the parking ticket
No,
correct level.
But I'm asking the question, though.
Right. No, I understand
Right.
that. But
No, and We don't know the cost of a parking ticket.
The most recent complaint I received, which isn't necessarily biblical, but is $75 at least on Main Street, so in exceeding the time.
So probably that's what it is then. Yeah. Okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah. So, additional questions? Councilmember Stallman.
Thank you. I think you guys, I think this is teed up nicely. I think there's been some good thought put into this, so appreciate that. The only question, and I had communicated a little bit with City Manager Penny, but I just wanted to sort of connect a little bit more. If we, as it seems likely, we put one of these NPPs onto Bemis Street, given its proximity to light rail, it's going to happen. And clearly the neighbors want it. But logistically, the people that are parking there now are going to go somewhere else. And so and I think City Manager Penny's right. At some point, there needs to be a constructive conversation about this with RTD in terms of what can we do. Because we're sort of just moving the pea around the walnut shell. The pea is under the walnut shell, and we're like moving it around to different neighborhoods. If you guys have any view to, it's not a reason to not do this, I get that, but on the other hand, have we thought about the corollary issues associated with putting this thing in place?
Sure, and if you squeeze the balloon, it gets larger in one area, and that's likely what happens with a lot of this. Moving forward, that will be an item to address, especially as more and more of these zones get established. Historically, they haven't been approved in the downtown zone, and our intention is to allow them to occur in the downtown zone, and therefore you will likely hear concerns and complaints regarding parking in the area.
Do you guys think there's, or have any reason to anticipate that hypothetically, if we end up pushing a lot of commuters out of this TOD, that it could negatively impact some of the downtown businesses?
That'd be speculation on my part. I wouldn't know.
Yeah, and I would make the argument that the answer is no. Okay. Given that what we see is commuters, if you look at the RTD lot in particular, it fills up before 8 o'clock, starting at, probably sometime after 6. And then at 5, it empties out. And so what proportion of those commuters are actually utilizing the downtown rather than just using it as a light rail parking lot?
Yeah.
And so I think more likely what you're going to see is some of those potentially moving over to the mineral station, possibly going up to the Inglewood station, getting there earlier, going, as you and I discussed, going to the next free neighborhood, and then they drive it. And this is not unusual. I mean, all the neighborhood parking permit programs, RPP programs, are about shifting behavior around. Right. And ultimately, I do hope that what this causes is RTD to receive some complaints and then desire to engage in a conversation with us or with a private developer to do a public-private partnership and develop some kind of mixed use or parking garage at the downtown station.
Okay.
Because ultimately the vast majority of these we believe are RTD over parks because they have not provided enough parking given the situation. Now I don't know how that is ultimately affected once the Lucent station goes in and how much they're willing to just handle complaints up until the southeast, southwest line gets extended in 20X. So, but we're certainly prepared to, and I know Mike looked at, what are the ramifications once Bemis goes in because people will relocate. Like water, it will flow to the closest parking space.
Okay, thanks.
So just a comment, observation myself in answer to that. During when Auraria campuses, the schools on Auraria campus are not in session, there generally isn't the backup on Bemis. It's just incredible. As soon as school starts, when the semester starts each time, then is when it tends to fill up, either with faculty and or students. Now, I know some of those are business folks, but the main part of that seems to be associated with the schools. And some of the people who park there actually should be parking at Mineral, but they have one chap I met one morning. He drops his daughter off at some facility, educational place in town or daycare or something, and then he rides from there. That's why he lives, out west someplace, but drives all the way there because of that. So it's an interesting combination of folks who park there. But I have a question then. So why are we not considering, well, I suggest we consider in who this program would serve, also downtown at night, when the bars and the restaurants are having a great time, which is wonderful. That's when a lot of the traffic backs up and parks on those streets. So it seems to me we ought to be thinking about that.
The language as written does not preclude us addressing that issue.
But would we? Well, what I'm reading it says it relates only to between 9 and 5. So if we approve this, are we also approving the overview? Or would you all be able to change that on your own?
And what area are you looking at specifically?
And it's page 2 of 4 of the...
of the overview?
Of the overview.
So yes, that will be addressed. We've actually had an issue recently come up, so we'll be modifying that. And the guidelines are designed for us to be able to modify them. So, but yes, that can be modified to address that issue.
And when you're talking about modifying, you're talking about administratively.
Yeah, administratively, correct. Not the ordinance itself. The ordinance allows for us to address that issue specifically. When we wrote those guidelines, they were specific for that 9 to 5 issue. But since then, we've had other issues arise specific to exactly what you're talking about in the downtown core.
So then I do have a concern about the ordinance, and I'm looking on the first page of the ordinance in, and I've got a little note written, let's see, 9.1.11, neighborhood permit parking zones, section A, upon receipt of a request signed by at least 50% of property owners of an area, etc.
Correct.
Some places are owned by people who live in California or someplace else. So I don't think it should be property owners. It should be people who live in the properties. And then,
if I may address that before you move on. The reason the prior program allowed for 75% of renters or owners to sign the petition. We dropped that down to 50% and said it must be owners, primarily because the renter then would be putting an encumbrance upon the property owner. Granted, it's likely the property owner would want the permit process because it would add value to the property. So I can't imagine a property owner would decline it.
Well, yes,
but it also could give the option of a property owner granting the authority to the tenant to sign as well.
Well, the ordinance would have to say that. I mean, that
yes,
you
correct.
could do that. I was thinking it could just be an occupant of at least 50% of the residences. Anybody who's living in that residence, because they have to do a petition, So, I don't think it should be absentee property owners who are tying up or having to facilitate this.
And that's purely a policy discussion on council's behalf. It can either be owners or tenants. The reason we presented it as owners is just because they own the property and therefore are responsible for the property.
So we don't have a motion yet, but when we do, I'll make a...
Okay. Mr. Mayor, may I jump in for a quick second? I'd like to respond to your question because I do have some knowledge of that. But before I do that, Mr. City Attorney, sorry to beat a dead horse. Full disclosure, in December of 2012, my neighborhood, my block, submitted an application for a parking permit for the previous iteration of this program. I don't know the status of that. I haven't been informed whether it's been approved. Well, I knew it hasn't been approved because I haven't heard anything, so I don't know what the status is. But same question, last thing. I'd like to answer Councilmember Cole's.
Same answer.
But I don't know if I can, right? I'm good.
You may.
Okay. Yeah. So we have many, well, everybody has many rental properties, as we do in Littleton, with long-term tenants. They're great tenants. They've got great relationships with their landlords. The landlords hope that they stay for a long time. But tenants are sometimes transitory. And I think what Mr. Broughton is saying, if I'm not, and tell me if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, is that there is a premise that the person that owns the property has a right that is in some facet superior to a person that is merely a tenant on the property. It doesn't mean that the tenant doesn't have a right of quiet enjoyment and all that kind of other stuff given to them by their lease, but that it would be actually to the benefit of the property owner if he or she has a tenant that has a car and stuff to, as a accommodation, just like installing new drapes or whatever, as an accommodation that is an attraction to that tenant to apply on behalf of the tenant. And I think that the if I'm not mistaken, that it's written that way. Is that correct?
The chief just mentioned the establishment of the zone is specific to the owner, but the permit a tenant could come and get the permit once the zone is established. Yes.
Right. So I think that property ownership is sacred in this country, in this city, and that there would be every reason for the property owner to want to accommodate the tenant's request. So I would see this more as, rather than the city developing a contractual relationship with the tenant, the city has, as written and as I would think would be preferable. Again, this is just my opinion. A contractual relationship with the property owner, and then if the tenant leaves, then the property owner can collect the permit and give them to the next tenant. So I would approve of the way that you've drafted it.
So if I'm going to get this straight, we may, right now we have a zero charge for the permit, but that goes to the people that live there. Or is that going to have to go, it's going to sound silly, to the people that are requesting it? And then they pass it on to their tenants?
The permit itself, you just modified, so the cost is $0.
I know,
no
but
fee.
We also recognize that we might do it.
The individual who would pull the permit or who would obtain a permit would pay for the permit, whether that be the owner or the tenant. The tenant would be allowed to get a permit.
The tenant would be the person inquiring or desiring the permit would come in, show proof of being in that district, because turnover occurs all the time, and so it's that car that we're issuing the permit to, tied to a license plate issued for a period of 2 years.
Okay. Additional questions? Councilmember Valdez.
So as far as the tenant permit, let's say they are issued the permit and they leave after 3 months, they take that permit with them. And maybe they've only, they've moved relatively close. But now the new tenants have to get a new permit, correct?
Correct.
So, but the other permit is still active.
The ordinance states that once they move out of the zone, it's no longer valid. And the permit itself is tied to the property, so that it will be marked with ink or however we care to finally to mark it with the name or address of the property.
Address, whatever, Bemis Street.
Sure.
And the other thing, and the city manager or designee will designate the zone.
Correct.
So at this point, how far east are we looking? Are we looking Bemis, Spotswood, Prescott, Crocker?
We're just Bemis right now. That's where the residents have requested.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the request that came in from Bemis was along Bemis Street on the east side to the park.
So as written then, and now Bemis will be in the zone, I'm assuming. So then Spotswood now becomes a problem. So then at that point you can then expand the zone as this is written?
It allows for the city manager or a designee to expand the zone, or it can be a subject of the property owners along that.
Assuming that they want it.
The zone,
so then, city manager designee then does have the flexibility of increasing it if need be.
If need be,
without having to come back to us.
Correct.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Okay, and I'll make it now because there isn't anyone on the roster. Just some consideration in carrying this forward to the TOD study, some consideration of what's happening with regard to the area. So it's not necessarily germane to this, but would be a comment I'd like to see. So thank you on that.
So another question. So what about, I thought there were already some places in areas of schools, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, but you just said we were just talking about downtown, but there are...
Correct. Historically, the program has been location-based. So Heritage High School, the neighborhoods around Heritage High School were the first, I believe, to obtain this neighborhood permit zone. Those existing zones are grandfathered for 5 years, and then they'll be reevaluated under this new process.
And so I'm still having a little difficulty if you have a tenant downtown, for example, who leaves, then you get a new tenant, but the other person actually still has his permit. I'm not tracking how that permit would expire.
The permit is marked with the address, and so it's only valid for that address or that area.
Yeah, but I've got it, and now I move 3, 4, 5 blocks away or whatever.
Let me jump in. I mean, this is an administrative action, and trust us, we can handle when people come in and out, not to be disrespectful, but when my license plate and my permit that I have issued 1, 2, 3, 4 to address 5678, and I leave, and the new resident comes in, shows Mike or shows the chief that I have this lease, we will shut down that other permit electronically, and when the person goes to run that permit, and it comes up and says it's not valid because I've now parked still in that zone hoping I could get away from it, it will show as an invalid permit,
Gotcha.
And we can handle it. I mean, neighborhood parking permit programs have been around for decades. We have matched and taken, and part of what Mike did was look at the best practices that we liked, and so there is software for this. It's a very straightforward system. The biggest issue, I think, is what Councilman Stallman brought up, which is we are going to be pushing people around in this, and that gets to Councilman Valdez's question as well, around being able to expand and respond quickly when the traffic pattern, the parking pattern changes again here. So, but the administrative piece of this is very straightforward, very easy for us to administer and handle.
Thank you.
Council? Can I just? Sure. Councilmember Beckman?
Just to put a positive spin on it, because we've kind of gotten in the weeds. This plan is a very valuable amenity to the neighborhoods that have it, and they're going to be grandfathered in. But I think they should all be very happy that the program is continuing. They're going to continue to get the same kind of protections and abilities. It's the townhouses along Mineral, close to RTD. It's the residences on the west side of Broadway near the car dealerships because of issues that have been presented in the past. It's the Heritage High School, which has been a plan in place for many years. This is all really good news that you're Now you're going to address the issue that the citizen brought basically to us a couple meetings ago to deal with 5700 block of South Bemis and can move into areas that weren't previously addressed. I think this is a great opportunity to problem solve. Not that there won't be administrative issues, there always are, but this is problem solving and it's helping the community. So it's a very good plan.
Thank you.
So, Council, I'm going to open the public hearing for Ordinance 25-2014 at 7:49 p.m. If anyone would like to make a comment during the public hearing, please come forward. Seeing no one, I close the public hearing.
Wait a minute.
Excuse me. Pam? Please state your name and address, because you're not on the roster.
Another page of the roster, which I'm going to hand.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. What was handed to me? So.
And my name is Pam Chadbourne. I live at Crestline in Nevada, downtown. I guess I'd like to thank several of you for noticing issues with this proposal. Good points, what's the cost of parking tickets and violations? That's not considered as a funding source here, and it should be. Councilmember Stein's comment is great, and he said it far more eloquently than I will try to restate, but it is, the parking problems downtown are not caused by the residents who live there. I live there. I've walked around. I've talked to all those folks. It's great that there are patrons of the downtown businesses, but they're parking in front of people's homes over and over and over. And that's a daily, more than irritant, it is a harm. I mean, when people are carrying children, when they are old and infirm, when they're carrying a lot of stuff to maintain their home, which is a reasonable expectation. These people can't park in front of their homes. They didn't cause this problem, and several of you have noted that the long-term problem is not being addressed and hasn't for years. So please move this downtown parking issue somewhere where people can create a task force, do something so that we move this forward. I think you talked about TOD, but let's get some citizens who live there involved. I really appreciate Councilmember Cole's comment about tenants, and I actually want you to consider that. In some way, just putting it for property owners is certainly simple, but I don't think it's appropriate. These comments that it should work are nice, but they're not reality. I know this, again, by talking to my neighbors. And so I think there should be some voice for tenants, renters, rather than property owners in this consideration or process. And City Manager Penny actually made a comment about RTD not supplying enough parking for their service, but the city is not supplying enough parking for its businesses. And it's given waiver after waiver to Merle's and all of those other businesses. Just appalling. So let's not point fingers at RTD if we ain't doing this for our citizens and our businesses as well. So, and the issue about change of address and that this is easy to administer, I'm not sure I buy that. Frankly, if you have a parking permit downtown, you're going to come and park here and use downtown for free. And I know that people park in the businesses near me, so they already abuse parking that these other businesses have provided. I think it's simplistic to put the burden on the next tenant to come down to the city and show the lease. It's not the right way to handle it. So my problem with this is, first off, that it gives complete and absolute jurisdiction to the city manager or designee. And I'm sorry, I'd like this to be more collaborative or involve more people. It shouldn't just be one person. Same kind of deal as the arborist, but this impacts far more people. So I think there ought to be something like the Engineering Design Committee or whatever. Second, I would like you to consider the traffic fees. It's wrong to charge the neighborhood people for this. The parking fees should contribute to the cost. There should be some limit to the people who are applying for this, what they're going to be charged.
Thank you, Pam.
Okay, and no cost for
Pam.
contractors compared to neighbors. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, anyone else? Please come down. State your name and address, please.
Harry Brandhorst, and I live on 5527 South Hill Street, just south of here. We have an interesting neighborhood there. We have businesses, we have my residence and a couple residences, we have apartments, and the apartments now charge a $30 fee for people to park in there, which originally was supposed to be a fee that was originally just supposed to have parking for those people in the apartments. Now they have 2 or 3 cars, so they park on the streets. We have RTD, we have everybody over there, and then we have Arapahoe Douglas County Mental Health. So I have to park 2 to 3 blocks away from my house sometimes just to find a parking spot. And I know the hair salon next door, they're really fighting it too. They can't get parking, so we really need to do something about this. And yeah, I like RTD too, so there should be a reasonable way to get around all of this, but we do need some permit parking. I've lived there since '87, and it gets worse every year. And that's, I don't know, with the apartments and stuff like that, are they going to get permit parking? And I don't know how that's all going to work. So that's a study that we need to look at.
Appreciate your question, Terry.
Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, I close the public hearing at 7:55 p.m. On Ordinance 25-2014. Council looking for a motion or additional discussion?
Move to approve the ordinance amending Title IX, Chapter 1 of the City Code pertaining to residential permit parking on second reading.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Additional discussion?
I do have a question. So, to the gentleman's question, how do we anticipate apartments fitting in here? Would we do the same thing with apartments that we're doing for single family?
Correct.
Thank you.
Let me understand that. So there's only much street space. So where would they be, a bunch of folks in apartments be parking?
First come, first served within the permit area.
Okay.
This is not, the permit parking program does not guarantee you a parking space.
Correct.
Since it's conflict resolution month, I'm not going to bring up RTD's temporary dirt parking lot over at
You're not?
I will not.
Okay. One of the things that was interesting is I listened to a podcast this last week that had several academics that study parking, and it was somewhat interesting that at any point in time, public parking, so not counting residential neighborhoods and garages and driveways and such, there's approximately 4 parking spots for every vehicle in the United States. And the interesting part is the academics actually agreed that what the challenge is that there's an expectation of free parking, and it's one of those things that it's kind of interesting when you look at human behavior on that front. I'm in favor of the ordinance in being a step towards a solution for those folks that are within residences in troubled areas. I don't think that it answers all of the parking issues that will ever be until we actually get to a marketplace approach on parking that is outside of what might exist within a residence. So that's some of my thought. Other comments? So, Council, this is item 7A. It's ordinance 25-2014, which is the second reading, amending Title IX, Chapter 1 of the City Code pertaining to residential permit parking. A vote of yes is in favor of moving forward with the administrative program.
Got that, Bruce?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Mayor, before you move on to the next agenda item, I wanted to let Councilmember Valdez and all of you know the parking ticket is $25. That's the fine for violating the parking.
Oh, that would have been useful information about 30 seconds ago.
Would you have voted
Actually,
differently?
it would not have been given the motion
Well,
on the
that's
table.
right, because it doesn't have anything to do with it. Yeah.
But ultimately, if there's a desire, I mean, realize that the fee is, I mean, you could set a separate fee for violation within the RPP zone if you'd want. I think for right now, given the newness of the program, we would suggest that let's just put the program into place for now, and to Councilman Brinkman's request earlier, we'll return in 6 to 8 months and let you know how the program's going, what the costs are, number of tickets being issued in that area, and you can have a discussion around that then. And then lastly, as I stated, I do think that this is going to generate a conversation about the downtown parking and the fact that the historic, opting into the historic district gave you a 50% reduction. That is on paper, obviously, but those cars are still coming down here. Those parking needs were based on standards across the country at the time, and so we are going to have to address that parking implication, because what has been happening is those 50% of spaces have been in the neighborhoods, and this ultimately is going to push them back, and they've got to go somewhere or they won't be coming downtown. So it will garner a conversation, and we'll set up a study session and be working with you and evaluating this over time. Thank you.
The response to that is looking forward to a database decision that we can deal with. Thank you.
Correct.
So, moving on to Agenda Item 7B, Ordinance 34-2014 is an ordinance on second reading approving a master agreement with KeyBank National Association. Doug, you want to step forward in case there's any questions? Okay. Council, any questions?
Just in case.
Just in case. Okay. Seeing no questions, I will open the public hearing for Ordinance 34-2014 at 8 p.m. I have no names on the roster. Anyone approaching? Seeing no one, I close the public hearing at 8 p.m. and 30 seconds. Council looking forward to a motion or discussion.
Motion to approve master agreement with KeyBank National Association on second reading.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
I was just going to compliment staff. I think this is good work. I mean, I think you guys trying to figure out how to get what we need, negotiate the service providers down and save a few bucks and get creative on this thing is nice work.
And just my own comment is moving to a Cleveland-based bank is kind of an interesting piece. That's just a side note. So, Council ready to vote in favor or not of Ordinance 34-2014, which moves us to KeyBank National Association. Okay.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Moving on to Agenda Item 7C, Ordinance 36-2014, which is an ordinance on second reading amending Title VI, Chapter 11, Section 5 of the City Code pertaining to disbursement of funds from the Littleton Victim Assistance and Law Enforcement Program. Chief. Council, any questions? Discussion? Glad that you're here, Chief.
Thank you.
Any comments?
Not if there aren't any questions.
You're learning. Thank you. So, Council seeing no questions or discussions, I'll open the public hearing at 8:02 p.m. for Ordinance 36-2014. I'm seeing no one approach, and we have no one on the roster. Therefore, I close the public hearing at 8:02 and 30 seconds. Council, any discussion or looking for a motion?
Move to approve the ordinance amending Title VI, Chapter 1, Section 5 of the City Code pertaining to disbursement of funds from the Littleton Victim Assistance and Law Enforcement Program on second reading.
Second.
Okay, just a small amendment. It's actually Chapter 11. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, Council?
Thank you.
Seeing none, Council ready to vote?
He has the secret one.
Yeah. The double secret.
Yeah, double secret.
Well, I better vote myself, right? Okay, here we are.
Chief.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Moving on to Ordinance, or Agenda Item 7D, which is Ordinance 37-2014, and we'll also include in this public hearing segment Ordinance 38-2014, both dealing with the allocation and budget for 2015. Ordinance 37-2014 is ordinance on second reading establishing the tax levy of 6.662 mills to defray the cost of municipal government of the City of Littleton, counties of Arapahoe, Douglas, and Jefferson, State of Colorado, for the city's fiscal year beginning January 1, 2015 and ending December 31, 2015. Finance Director Farman, any questions on this, Council?
Actually, did have one.
Councilmember Stallman.
Doug or City Manager Penny, no, that's okay. You can stay up there. We had talked at some point. We've done the street inventory at this point, and that's coming to council in a month or two.
Yeah, I don't know if that's been agended yet. I think we're still looking at the preliminary information. Mike Broughton is working with Charlie Blossom, Public Works Director, on that information, and I'm not sure if that has been set aside as an agenda date yet. But it will be on a study session.
November.
In November?
No.
It's going to be the
8th. Second meeting in November.
It's coming up. Let me check. Continue.
Okay, that's fine. Because I guess, I mean, but it wouldn't be, if this issue were to be impacted, again, theoretically, we're talking, next year or whenever from an election perspective.
Yes, I think we'd have to look at phasing certain projects in, looking at streets that are in dire need of repair, and looking at funding mechanisms going forward in the long term and reaching those goals.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Additional questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, I open the public hearing. Let me do Ordinance 38-2014 in case there's any questions on that, which is an ordinance on second reading known as the Annual Appropriation Bill for all municipal purposes of the City of Littleton, counties of Arapahoe, Douglas, and Jefferson, State of Colorado for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2015 and ending December 31, 2015.
And if I can jump in, Councilman Stallman, it's December 9th. That study session is scheduled.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions or discussions with the Finance Director on this? Seeing none. Okay. I will open the public hearing for the two ordinances in case anyone wants to come down and comment. So I'm opening the public hearing for Ordinance 37-2014 and Ordinance 38-2014 at 8:05 p.m. I have no one on the roster. Anyone willing to come down and comment? Seeing none, I close the public hearing at 8:05 and 30 seconds. Council looking for the first motion dealing with Ordinance 37-2014 or additional discussion?
Move that the ordinance approving the 2014 tax mill levy ordinance be approved on second reading.
Second.
Okay. Council, we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, Council ready to vote? And this mill levy level has been around since, I believe, 1989. So thank you so much.
Sorry. I thought you'd already had it on there.
This motion carries.
It's up or down, right, Bruce? Is that what it is?
You go up, Jerry.
Okay. Thank you, Council. Now looking for a motion on Ordinance 38-2014.
Motion that the ordinance approving the 2015 annual appropriation be approved on second reading.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. This is our 2015 budget. Council, any additional discussion? Seeing none, Council ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Okay, thank you. That's our 2015 budget. It is now at least in a working place.
Thank you, Council.
We move to...
Mayor, your lights are still on.
Oh, thank you. So, general business, do you want to make any motion relative to parking fines at this point in time or leave it to a study?
I'm ready to move on to 8A.
Okay, so we now have agenda item 8A, which is Resolution 106-2014, which is a resolution approving the Littleton Village Replat 1 Subdivision Final Plat and Subdivision Improvement Agreement. Community Director Van Nimwegen.
Mayor and Council, thank you very much. This is the first preliminary plat where you're actually seeing some of the parcels in Littleton Village become home sites. So Richmond American is here tonight to answer any questions specific to the product, but I'll just run through real quickly the parcels that are part and the subdivision layouts for these three parcels. I think by now you know where Littleton Village is. So this is basically the final plat that shows what's actually allowed as far as the existing zoning. You approve the final plat, which dedicated all the major collector streets in the project, including Fremont and Pennsylvania and Dry Creek Place and so on. And the one thing that you also did when you did the final plat was a major subdivision improvement agreement that put in all the assurances that those major roadways be constructed. So what we're talking about here is three different parcels. It's parcel P, M, and T. And again, Richmond American is the builder. They're asking for approval of 101 lots in the final plat. So here's a little bit more detail that's in your final plat for those three different parcels. Again, we also have the subdivision improvement agreement. It's that only has to do with right-of-ways. So the only thing that's public right-of-way is that little segment of East Dry Creek Circle, which is in parcel M in the lower right-hand portion. So You've seen some big numbers with the overall subdivision improvement agreement, but this is a relatively small agreement. It assures that that East Dry Creek Place gets built. When we look at what was approved in the zoning and what's actually before you, we actually are dropping some of the density from the maximum that they were allowed. With Parcel P, they are allowed up to 18 units per acre, more of a multifamily project. As you see, and I'll show you, we have a higher density single-family detached product at 15 units per acre. So instead of 65 units, you're looking at 56 units. When we move to Parcel M, we're really talking about a typical single family. Again, the PD had 14 units per acre allowed on this parcel. They're in at 5 units per acre, so we're going from 60 potential units to 22, and the lot sizes run from 4,700 up to about 9,800 square feet. Parcel T, again, the PD allowed 7 units per acre. They're at half that at 3.7 units per acre, so instead of 40 units, we're looking at 23 units. So here's Parcel P. This is the highest density of the projects, but they are detached single-family project. The lots range from 1,800 up to 3,000 square feet, and there's a total of 56 units. These are all private drives in here, and the project is loaded from the rear. So here's the front elevations that are actually going through design review now. So this is the front of the unit. All garages are in the back, and they gain access through the private drive. So as you can see, it's a higher density, more of an urban project, but it is detached. And I think part of that is there's a demand for detached units. But I think you could also look at construction defects or creating some unique housing styles, and this is one of them. And then we look at parcels M and T, and again, the lot sizes range from 4,700 up to 9,800 square feet. These will be detached single-family homes. Here's the rest of the parcel. If you might remember, the original PD in this case along the east edge was really for more cluster homes where there would be cul-de-sacs and there would be units around it. But I think what the applicant is showing you is something that there's really a hunger for the market for, and that's more of a typical single family. And I think these lots get close to 10,000, from 7,000 to 10,000 square feet as well. And here's, I'm sorry, it looks a little pushed together. They actually, the elevations look better than this, but I think for whatever reason, it kind of squeezed them a bit. But these are kind of the typical elevations that will be built on parcels M and T. One of the things we want to point out to council is a minor amendment to some of the major collectors. The top section was what was originally proposed with the PD, was a very large travel lane and a very large bicycle lane. And the applicant really wanted to get an opportunity to provide parking on that street. Staff thought it was a good idea because, again, we talked about parking in your front door, and that's really what we're going to have along those two major collector streets, boulevard streets with the landscape median between. We'll have front doors facing out onto that street. We also think that parked cars provides a buffer to kids on the sidewalk, and it narrows down the traffic lane, which we think will slow traffic. So with that, one of the things we're required to do is get preliminary plat approval by the planning board for this parcel, and that was granted on September 22nd, 2014. So we are recommending approval of the final plat and the SIA. And I'm here, and Matt Hengel from Richmond American is here as well for any questions you might have.
Okay, and just before we move on, clarification from the city attorney, are we in quasi-judicial status at this point in time?
Yes.
Okay, so council, please note. Okay, would the applicant care to make some comments? And Glenn, they may want to ask you some questions before the applicant, but you can move ahead the projector.
I seem to be having trouble. Oh, here we go. Chair, the applicant would like to see his presentation.
Jan, do you want to help with the
Is that the
technology
sky
side
above
of
the
it?
project?
And then Glenn, Councilmember Stallman may have some questions for you to start with.
Here comes somebody who knows what he's doing.
Yes, sir.
Well, a couple of questions. You were showing the PM and T parcels. Refresh my memory. Had part of this, I think, had to do with we had approved the rezone for the streets a year or so ago, and help me understand. We're not doing the other parcels that are in here are not being requested to final plat at this time?
That's right.
And that's because they're not yet ready to construct?
We do have another home builder, Century Homes, that's looking at those other parcels on the east half, but they are not ready yet.
I see. Okay. And pretty much all these parcels say they're medium density, but P looked a lot denser than the other two, M and T. I mean, the ones that are in here that are light shaded as well are also, I mean, the whole thing is medium density, but it doesn't necessarily look like they're all comparable in terms of medium density. So how should we interpret that?
Sure, I would say because I think P is actually by the PD plan allows up to 18 units per acre.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really put that on medium density. That's almost at a multifamily type of density. But they're in at 15, which is a typical townhouse. I would maybe say that's a medium density.
Okay. In any of these, the renderings you had up there seem to be multi-story. I know we've heard a lot of feedback and requests from people looking for a patio home type of product. Is any of that envisioned? Or alternately, on some of these parcel P items, are those all stairs? Are there any elevators or anything in there if people?
I think perhaps, and again, Matt could probably answer that. I think for P, I think it could be an option. You would pay for it. But as you can see, either the right or left end of the elevation is really a stairwell. So you come in, there'll be a small, perhaps an office space and your garage on the first floor. Your living rooms are kind of in the middle, and then your bedrooms are at the top. In fact, there's even walkout balconies on some of the units on the top floor as well.
So hypothetically, I use that word a lot, what latitude do we have to go in and say, you know, that's great, be nice to see a few patio homes?
I think you'll see more of that type of housing from Century. At least what we've seen from a preliminary standpoint are more of a typical patio home. I think what Matt will tell you is they do have I think some of the 2 stories do have bedrooms on ground floor, so it does kind of meet that need. I think one of their more popular models is that 1-story unit that I showed, and perhaps they'll find that's the case here. I think that's certainly what we hear every day.
Okay, thanks.
And Director, on the south side of the properties along Dry Creek and on the east side of the properties along the Centennial border, is there envisioned a fence? And is that part of the platting that we would be discussing?
I'm sorry, Mayor,
a fence.
I heard that. A fence?
Yes.
Yes.
Along Dry Creek and then also along the east side that abuts Centennial.
Correct. I know definitely on East Dry Creek, there'll be a fence in those folks' backyards. I know they've been having some discussion with the folks that are directly abutting the property, so I don't know. They're trying to get a consensus on what the fence might look like if it needs to be replaced, so I don't know for sure if we have a resolution to that.
So from your perspective, there's no fence requirement on the east side? from the city's perspective, included in the plan.
There's an existing fence. Is that correct?
I bet he can answer.
And it may be better to just have Matt come up.
He said.
I vote
Yes.
for that.
So, okay. Councilmember Beckman?
When you made the decisions to approve the width of the street to include the ability to have on-street parking, there was a couple measurements that had to change in order to allow for that. The bike lane went from 8 feet wide down to 5 feet wide. The drive lane went down from 16 down to 13. Are those still within the range of what is a normally acceptable width for those types of functions in a residential community?
Yes. Public Works took a long and hard look at that and feel comfortable with what's shown here.
Okay. Council, let's move to the applicant, please. Matt, you can start by stating your name and association.
Yeah, hi, actually. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm Jared Carlin with Norris Design. I'm representing Matt Hengel with Richmond American Homes. And thank you very much for your time this evening. I'll try to keep it brief. Glenn kind of showed some of the same things I was planning on showing as well, so I'll kind of skip over those quickly. Well, we're happy to be here in front of you. Like I said, I'm representing Richmond American Homes, and Matt Hengel, he's here. We're the landscape architect and planner on the project, and my colleague Kim Holland is here as well. Our civil engineer Tess Hogan with Innovative Land Consultants is here, and then our surveyor Derek Brown with Aztec. So we're here to answer any questions after our brief presentation. We're excited to be on the project's largest infill project in Littleton. We've heard about it for years. We're just excited to have the opportunity to work on it. Here's a quick aerial. As you know, there's 77 acres for the whole Littleton Village site. To the north and to the east are the City of Centennial residential neighborhoods. To the west is an office kind of park, and then to the south is gas station, and other hospital and other neighborhood. Here's a couple photos from a couple weeks ago at the site. Construction's happening. They're moving dirt on overlock grading, putting in the roads, drainage facilities, and that kind of thing. So we're excited to see that it's moving along quickly, and hopefully next year you'll see some of our projects come out of the ground. Here's the map, the GPDP map and zoning map. As you move from west to east, you go from more of the commercial uses to the brown areas, kind of in the middle, which will be multifamily, and then as you move east, you kind of have the change in the densities. So parcel P, as you'll see, and as Glenn talked about, is the most dense residential parcel that we'll be talking about. The three dark yellow pieces are the Richmond American Home parcels. The four kind of light yellow pieces are the Century parcels. We're really pleased with the open space network that was already planned here, and we're trying to take advantage of that with the planning of each one of those blocks. And I hope you can see that as well. Going into each parcel, this is parcel P, the highest density parcel. It's still below and meets the intents of the GPDP and the zoning as far as the number of lots. We've taken a lot of care to make sure that all of our front doors front open space, open areas, and so you'll see that surrounding the entire site. Even the lots that are interior to the site have an open corridor running through the middle, east to west. It's alley loaded, internal guest parking. You can see interior to the site. There's spots there for internal guest parking, and then on-street parking surrounding the parcel. It's compatible with the intended use outlined in the GPDP. The homes to the west capitalize they're on the Central Park. It's fabulous. The homes on the north and on the south capitalize on the very large median and boulevard that's going east-west on those streets. We've had a lot of meetings with city staff, with fire department, with Denver Water and the Metro District, et cetera, and they've all been really favorable and good meetings with them. As Glenn showed, here's our conceptual architecture. There's rooftop patios. It's very urban. It complements the surrounding area. We in the community, we think we're excited about these and think it's going to be really successful. The addition of on-street parking, we're happy with that. We think that's going to be a real added benefit to the project. This is parcel M as you move further east. It's got a street that bisects, public street that bisects the parcel. This is sort of as you get into more of the traditional single-family product. There's going to be main floor master bedroom homes here, and there's also going to be ranches. So hopefully, Councilmember Solomon, that helps to answer some of your questions there. And we've had lots of meetings going back and forth with Street WIS and how this was all laying out and fronting the public streets surrounding it with staff. This is the architecture for Parcel M, and it's suburban and for, geared to more of that traditional single-family nature. It has a varied articulation, varied facades and heights, turning garages and all that kind of thing. And then here's the last parcel, Parcel T, and this actually is rotated, so north is to the right. It'll have on these lots, it'll have a 3-rail, open rail fence with wire mesh on the east end of those lots, and then there's going to be a corridor there with planting that we've worked really closely with David Flagg and the city to add planting material in there and working. There's easements and stuff that go in there, so we're outside of those easements and in a way that it's going to work to add a beneficial buffer to the neighborhood to the east. And then the same architecture on that parcel as with Parcel M. We've worked. The last thing I would like to say is we worked really hard with the staff, and they've been fantastic. Glenn and Jan, Andrea, Bob Deeds, David Flagg, Charlie, et cetera. They've been very helpful through the process, and can't thank them enough for their assistance. So with that, like I said, we're all here. We're excited about the project. It's good. We're here to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
Okay. Council questions? Councilmember Stallman.
How does the selection of the design work on the various parcels? Are you guys going to sell the parcels, and then whoever purchases, the purchaser comes in and designs based upon your product, or you're not going to build spec and then try to sell what you've built, do you?
No, so and Matt, jump in if I need to, if you need to. But so there's a master developer that's developing all the parcels and laying out the roads, and then Richmond has bought those 3 parcels and will build these homes and sell the homes. So they will be the ultimate developer.
Yeah, no, that. So I understand that, but the process of building the homes, what comes first? Do you build first, or do you find a buyer who tells you what they want, and then you build based on the product availability they select?
Sounds like a little bit of both, but maybe I'll let Matt answer that.
So, Matt Engel, Richmond American Homes. Typically, we like to, in this project, we hope to have a large interest list up front, so we'll be building for the buyer. But, occasionally we will build a spec home, or a buyer will drop out and we'll have a spec home to sell.
But predominantly, so if the market, and I'm going back to the patio or the ranch style, which you've got, it seems to be, I guess that's the one in the middle there on the top, but depending on what people, if you are working the pre-sale side of the whole thing, if you get a lot of interest in the ranch style, then that's what you would tend to build more of, and if you don't, you won't.
True, and we are working with the city to vary the streetscape.
Okay.
So there may be limits on how many ranches we end up selling. I can tell you ranches are always a great seller, especially in town. We know there's a lot of empty nesters out there looking for that, and the main floor master obviously accomplishes that as well.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, council? Okay. Seeing none, do we need a public hearing? Not tonight, right? This is a resolution on a plat, right? Okay.
Right, Mayor. And the reason I hesitated before, it's not a public hearing matter, which many of our quasi-judicial proceedings are, but it does involve a site-specific property, which is why it's quasi-judicial.
Right. Understood. Thank you. Just want to make sure we're clear and get it right. Okay, so council with no more questions, looking for a motion.
Motion to approve the resolution approving the Littleton Village Replat 1 subdivision final plat and subdivision improvement agreement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Just a lot of excitement on main floor master, as well as the ranches. I can tell you that the question I get is, are they? And once I say some, it's going to be when. So I think, Matt, you'll have some excitement that comes out of the market on that. One question that I've neglected to ask earlier, price points roughly?
And yeah, just to let you know, we have had significant interest already. I get phone calls from people, I don't know how they find me. So the higher density products, 1,600 to 2,000 square feet, we expect base pricing in the low 300s. For the more traditional, it'll be 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. We expect pricing kind of the mid 400s, 425 to 475. Obviously, that shifts as the market moves up, and if there's demand, construction costs can go up, things like that. But that's generally what we're targeting at the moment.
Okay. And Councilmember Beckman?
And just along those lines, is there some place where Richmond has a community already established that has a similar look to what you're proposing here?
We have a number of communities nearby off Lincoln, in Lone Tree area, Parker, Southeast Aurora. We're kind of all over that corridor. So if you go to our website and look, and if you see on here the names are actually under the plans, you can go to our website and look at some of those neighborhoods and see which ones have those plans. Or if you'd like me to email you and let you know directly, I can do that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Jared. Council, additional questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second before us. Council, ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Now move to comments and reports. First up, City Manager.
Mayor, just one comment quickly to let you know we have engaged a architectural firm, DLR Design, who is assisting us with the citywide, I shouldn't say citywide, for City Hall and public service buildings to look at our space needs, which includes the council chambers and the community room. So that process is ongoing. It'll take a couple months, but we'll keep you guys updated on that one. So, and Mayor, you already spoke of the meeting coming up, so thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Valdez.
At the last meeting where y'all had the opportunity to take the mayor out to the woodshed, and you didn't, I would like for Michael and I, the city manager and I have talked about this, about an additional meeting where there was one, or at the meeting it was discussed about whether or not they should have an additional meeting to address the questions of all the residents. I think the idea of just saying, no, we're just going to cease and desist, it puts the planning board in a bad position, and the residents, I think it gives them a bad taste. And I realize it was about something that is no way going to happen. And the city manager and I talked about that, how they can, at least we can give something to the city, from the city to the residents that'll show that those streets, or at least one street, was it? Gallup, I believe, yeah, something like that. I mean, make a quick change on that. Oh, but I would still like to see that there be a meeting, an organized meeting with that group out there, since there was one that was promised. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Brinkman?
No report.
Councilmember Stein?
Let me hold off till the end, if I might.
Okay. Councilmember Stallman?
Thank you. Report on the LIFT board meeting last night, and the predominant takeaway was that the board approved the Littleton Boulevard and Broadway plans, and we'll be seeing those shortly, and the actual plan documents themselves will end up on the LIFT website. The information, the agenda for last night's meeting included public information meeting that you guys can see and nobody on television can see, but City Manager Penny forwarded that, and I wanted to commend the information to you. Everybody's got a busy schedule, but the synopsis of the plans and the objectives of the plans and the relationships of the plans for all of these areas to the comprehensive plan and the authorities' activities and so forth and so on, funding mechanisms or and implementation of the plans is synopsized very well in the document that was sent out. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it at your convenience, recommend you spend a little time. It's a fairly easy read, and we don't collectively at this juncture, we're not spending as much bandwidth thinking about this particular topic at this level as we will be in the short run. And so as far as a primer is concerned, where we get into the discussion and then don't think about it for a while, it's a really good document as a refresher to remind everybody what the attributes and some of the specific elements of what LIFT is doing at this juncture and what we're going to see coming to us in the short run. Again, just some of the key takeaways from what's in here is that the intent of this whole grand project is to offset economic risk to market development. If some parcels or if some properties or if some property owners or business owners desire to improve their properties, which is our intent, and the economics just won't accommodate their intentions, then the ability of the Urban Renewal Authority LIFT to go in and gap fill with some level of tax increment financing is an extremely valuable tool to be able to use as situations warrant. As was discussed last night, whenever any of these areas is included, not every parcel is going to utilize the funding mechanism to make improvements. So, for example, a King Soopers is part of the urban renewal area on Broadway. And because they've already done most of their work, once the base is set, at some point in the future when a project shows up, their assessed value and their tax amount, property tax amount may go up, and if the project if a future project needs some sort of economic gap filler, some of those funds from that project could be applied within that particular urban renewal area to improve infrastructure and enhance the property values and the retail experience and the business, the commercial corridor in that area broadly. So in that way, King Soopers, even though it may not be using the funds directly, is contributing funds to a future project for infrastructure development and is benefiting the community broadly in that regard. And again, the TIF revenues are only intended to be one tool to be used to facilitate investment and reinvestment, and not the first tool to fill any project financing gap. I should say they're a tool. I wouldn't say necessarily a tool of last resort, but it wouldn't be inappropriate to think of it that way either. I'll leave it at that at this juncture. I do think this was an outstanding document, and to the city manager, if that's something that, since it is a public document, if we can get it on our website as well, that'd be terrific.
If I may, Mayor, I think I would add on to Councilman Stallman's comment. If you think about the relative cost of bonding, which is the benefit of the urban renewal tax increment finance, you've got to have a project that is of sufficient magnitude where you would actually bond against it and not do some other kind of financing mechanism. And you're probably not going to do that in a lot of these areas because the public improvement costs associated with that are tens of thousands of dollars or potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars. It's really the Santa Fe corridor where you're going to see that, and that's where we would expect it in particular to come through, because you've got to have the revenue in there and the cost and the expenditures to make it worthwhile.
And this was in some respects brought up last night at the board meeting, because there's a desire as these documents are voted on by the board to send to us as a recommendation. They are of a detail level that's not inconsistent with something like a comprehensive plan, and they can't have the specific attributes of projects because the projects don't exist yet. And so what was discussed last night was that these general concepts are being approved for recommendation to City Council, and if Council approves it, then the next step would be a more detailed parcel-specific project wherein these attributes could come into play. And as the city manager said, a lot of times it may be something like an ENSOR or some other larger parcel would be much more easily accommodating of a bonding element to generate the funding to do this, whereas some of the smaller parcels, a one-off kind of approach might be a different way to go. So.
Okay, let me pile on just a little bit in terms of taking some of that and put it into more vernacular, which is the when you're referring to the gap filling financing, the gap filling means that it's taking care of some financing relating to public improvement associated with the project. And when you're talking about offsetting market risk, what it does is it puts the financing of those public improvements together with the project so that the project is taking on that financial risk and it's paired with that. And so the risk gets placed along with the project as opposed to the city taking on the public improvement. What does happen is once it's financed and the building actually occurs, the public improvement occurs, and it's somewhat unrelated to the success of the project. I don't ever want to demean any project, but the public improvement actually occurs, and the city did not have to put itself at risk for those public improvement financing. So,
thank you for that. There's a cautionary tale here, is because when we get into this stuff at a detail level, it becomes really easy to talk in the language that the urban renewal experts talk in.
I tried vernacular, so you
no,
want,
that's good. That's good.
You want the Shakespearean comments?
No. But thank you for that. I appreciate the clarification. You're right. It's always good to try to get this into, King's English or layman's terms. Yes. So thank you.
Councilmember Cole?
Yeah, so just an observation on Shakespeare. That was vernacular at the time. So particularly that line that you quoted earlier. So this is a great time of year for city events, and so some of you, I'm not sure if anybody here, not recognizing faces, attended the Harvest Festival at the museum properties. Incredible event. 8,668 people attended, and they all seemed to have an incredibly good time. So that, and then they also, some of them anyway, go downtown and shop and do other things when they're here, but brought a lot of people who don't live to the city, and of course a lot who do. So super event, that's all. Thank you.
Well, and the museum is also going to have the Walk of the Dead, which you might say is for folks that don't necessarily live in the city either.
Oh, geez.
Councilmember Stein.
My turn.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
I just want to thank the team for helping me get through a difficult vote.
Councilmember Stein.
Thank you, Mayor. I had prepared a lengthy report for this evening. Upon reflection and honoring the spirit of Conflict Resolution Month, I have no report for this evening.
Thank you. Three things that I want to mention. One is we did have some presence among council at yesterday's grand opening of the Aging Well Resource Center at the library. There weren't quite 100 people there, but there were over 60 people there, so somewhere in between is probably where the number is. And I mentioned that for the Aging Well Resource Center, the reason why it's there is for folks to come in a comfortable environment and have a private conversation where they don't really have to worry about 3 words and 4 words that Americans don't typically like to say. One is, I don't know. And maybe they can come in, and the second is a 4-letter word that says, can you help me? So I'm pretty excited about that and all the reasons that we have for that. The second is a little bit of my perspective on the agenda for the planning board is not necessarily to identify specifically what the answers are, but maybe to get the agenda focused on the items that we would like to have considered and trying to move the administrative side of what we're not going to see or not do into one of those things that maybe the staff could collect those for the planning board and they can deal with it more expeditiously as opposed to possibly fostering upsettedness that we don't need to have, but maybe being in a position to ask them to focus on the TOD plans, and maybe questions around accessory dwelling units, and maybe even dealing with code issues like how many unrelated adults in a house. So some of those issues and whether we agree but it's not setting the answers as much as trying to set, here's some of the things to deal with. And then want to leave with reminding everyone that they are invited to our event next Tuesday. Postcards of some sort that kind of look like this. They're nice and colorful and disturbing, only because that's the way I guess things get read these days when they enter the mailbox. I get some pretty scary postcards dealing with political issues right now. I mean, very political issues relating to the election. So trying to get separated from some of that clutter is what we're trying to do. The ask is for folks to respond if they are interested in coming, although that's not a requirement, but there is a email address, RSVP, so folks can kind of remember that if they have any French in their background, at littletongov.org, which they should have. But one of the things that we do know is that if you feed them, they will come. For folks that may be coming right from work or otherwise want some snacks, Jerry Hill, I'm just looking out, and you happen to be the only one that's over there. But if those things are important, there will be some snacks provided. Again, it's going to be an environment where there's going to be small tables, and folks will have a chance to have some conversations with citizens. Summary comments are going to be captured, and what we do want to do is deal with some of the areas where questions have come up, and also some questions yet to come up about in a positive sense, what folks are looking for from the city. We've spent a number of years together. Most of us have gone through a re-election, or at least an election to 4-year term, and are beyond our first year, 2 years, or getting to that point. And know that we've been working towards trying to understand the economic vitality of for the future of the city and dealing with that. And that's really our struggle. Is we do value the city and we do love the city, and how do we actually position ourselves on a spiral up and moving forward. So I'm pretty excited about it. We should be having some fun. I understand I get some opening comments and some closing comments, so I am looking for some audience that will at least chuckle at some jokes that I might throw in. Don't know where they are yet, but we'll have some.
Make them a little shorter.
Okay. So thank you all. And absent any balancing retorts, we're adjourned for the evening, and thank you all.
Maybe next.